Okay, so it is March 22nd, and we are here with our infinite wisdom guest, Brian Seth Hurst. And I am so excited to be introducing him to everybody. Now, it's a small, maybe small tribe tonight, but lots of people watch the replays that I will be sending out for the next week or so. So welcome, my brother from another mother, Brian. And we're going to tell you, because there are two Jennies on the call, not just one, we're going to tell you how Brian and I met. Do you want to take it away?
I was on a plane. I was riding next to your mother, who, and you know how much I loved your mother, but she was and still is someplace a character. And your mother was quite gregarious, and as was I. And so we had this conversation, and the next thing I know, I was invited to dinner, I guess it was.
My birthday party.
Your birthday party, that's right. That's right, your birthday party. And then you and I and Jim and my partner at the time, we became buds. I was, remember the kids actually being born. I remember having Riley on my shoulders in a park in Santa Monica. And yes, and we, to be honest, although we don't talk that often, my memory of our history is that we have always been there for one another in the tough times.
Yeah.
And as fellow Pisceans, we understand each other.
Yes, we do. And I think that was, for many years, I had been so quiet about my other life. And when I met Brian, and he and I sort of connected with the same language, and we were both in theater. So we understood that world, and we understood this woo-woo world to the extent that we did at that time.
And Jim grew up 10 minutes from me.
And Jim grew up 10 minutes from you. So there were all these cross connections. And finally, I remember taking a walk with Brian in Santa Monica and sort of being able to unburden myself and speak freely for the first time in a very long time, if maybe ever, about all these ideas and all these other experiences that I had had and that he had had. And because we both shared this Piscean nature, we're 10 days apart in March. It really was like finding a brother. And so we've lived in various places. When we were in Texas, Brian's partner at the time his family was from there, so they'd come and visit. And so we'd have
guest house.
Yeah. And may I just say, most of these folks have read my little book that I put out in December. And one of the highlights of how everything developed, I said to the universe, you want me to spread this infinity wave around the world, and I live next to a sheep farm in rural Massachusetts. I don't have a website. I don't know how to do any of that. So I said, you're going to have to take care of it, because I really don't know what to do. And then I go to your Christmas party, and you say, you have to meet my friend Jennifer. And Jennifer comes in, and the room empties. I don't even know if you know this, but
I knew you got on like a house on fire.
Well, what happened was I was in that back room, and I think I've explained this to some people, maybe not everybody's heard it, but it was a pretty snug little house. And there was this, so there weren't that many places you could go and sit and have this wonderful holiday party. Brian is an incredible chef and party giver. So, and I just happened to be there because I was helping a friend out with her surgery. And I just put her to bed, and snuck out to go see Brian. And there was this room in the back, and there were about, 7 or 8 people in it with me, and people were eating and doing this and that. And I didn't know anybody. So I was just sitting by myself. And then through the door comes Brian's head with this woman, Jennifer, and says, Jennifer meet Hope, Hope meet Jennifer, and Brian leaves, and Jennifer comes and sits right next to me, and everybody in the room gets up and leaves. Like as if, hello, you know, and then we sat and talked together for 20 minutes or 25 minutes. No one came in the room. And as soon as we were done talking, and she said, I want to work with you. And I didn't know what that meant yet. And I said, sure, okay. You know, like, I don't know what working with Jennifer meant. And as soon as we were done, everybody came back in the room. And then I had to go. It was the most amazing facilitation that you provided in your home. And who better than you to make that connection? Because that started a ripple effect that you know just made a big difference and did make the wave, did introduce the wave to the world through her. So you've been so instrumental at different points in my life and my kids' lives. And I just love the fact that we are still able to just say, hey, bud, come on and talk to my peeps on visioning. And you go, yeah, sure, I'll be right there.
It's, you know, I'm honored to be here. As you know, I would probably do anything you asked me to do. Probably even if it was illegal, I might even consider it because it's you. But yes, I'm happy to be here. I actually had no idea we were live. This is how much I trust you. And you know, when we were on together and you said, and now all my people, but people will come in, and I'm like, what? I had no idea this was live because I just said yes because it was you. So
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I haven't given you a proper introduction because, you know, Brian, as I wrote in my email about him, introducing him, Brian is very strong on the psychic end of things, on the creative end of things. He's multi-talented, and he has grown this incredible industry of VR, right? Virtual reality. He has been a big part of that whole thing, sort of mushrooming. So just briefly, can you talk a little bit about that and
you know,
and also how that plays in with your psychicness?
So, you know, the other day someone said to me, because I'm embarking on something new, as you know, and the other day someone said to me, wow, you have just done so many interesting things with your life. You're always doing something exciting. And for me, I say, yeah, what it really was a lack of focus. I don't see it as that. I see it as chasing shiny objects. But I had been working in television, and I had been working in new media, and I got a headset when Samsung's VR headsets, very first one came out. And what I am is a writer and a storyteller before, during, after everything. I mean, I say you could tell me there are a million things in the world I could do, but you can't tell me I can't tell a story. And so, or write. And when I was in the headset, all you ever want to do as a storyteller is immerse people in the world and in the story. And that's what virtual reality was doing. It was yet another hype cycle that I had gotten caught in, because I'd gotten in the interactive television hype cycle, and then, you know, these cutting edge things, always trying to balance somewhere in my mind the humanity or human beingness of something with technology, so that it's not, you know, technology running me, it's me using technology for the betterment of God knows what. So I got into it. I tend to be someone who has to research everything, have to learn as much as I can. I've always been that kind of curious person, and sort of became, at the time, like one of 5 people in the world who knew what to do. But the secret is I knew who to go to. You're only as good as the team around you. And if you're smart, you hire people that are better and smarter than you are. And so that's what I did. And I ended up working for Showtime and for PBS. And lately, to be completely honest, I had a lot of loss over the last couple of years. Both my father and my sister had passed away. I'm in an 11-year cycle. Thank God this is the 11th year. And in that 11-year cycle, oh, my mother died. I had a 20-year relationship end. I put 2 dogs down. My father died. My sister died. My business crashed and burned. It was like, and Hope, you were there for some of that. You remember how, I mean, literally, I was a walking, it was like Pigpen in Charlie Brown, where he was surrounded by a cloud of dust. I was just walking in darkness. But recently, coming out of all this, I began to notice a certain amount of desperation among my colleagues in show business to stay relevant, and to hold on to an identity that they had. And what I realized was I didn't want to be a part of that world anymore, but I didn't want to let it go because I had status in that world. And so to let that go was literally letting go of an identity. That identity, to me, was someone who had a lot to prove. And this is based on how I grew up. So I call it the burden of proof. So I was constantly on myself to prove something. At the same time, like, I was elected second vice chairman of the Television Academy, chairman of the Producers Guild and the Media Council. My motives for that was to get everybody else working. So I still had this I need to get back, but I was being martyred for the cause. And so coming away from all that and looking at this and going, oh my gosh, my recognition is, and I'll talk about what I'm doing in a minute, but my recognition was, wow, so I'm letting go of an old identity. I'm letting go of status. In addition to having lost family members, I'm orphaned right now. And in addition to moving, we left that little house in Studio City and now live up in Sierra Madre, where I don't know if it will ever stop raining. In the foothills, with bears, not this kind, but the real kind. And oh, I'm sorry, that's terrible. Hold on 1 second, please.
Look at his toys.
I always try to, yes, that's my little kid. I have to have, Mr. Jetson and Mr. Machine, because that little boy is who gets the joy. And so then I realized, oh my gosh, when you change identities, when you let go of the way you were and the obligation to be that person, and you let go of any status that was associated with that person, even though you've tried really hard and you really put everything in it you have, you let go of that, and there is grief. And that grief is as real as someone dying, because it's a part of you that's dying. Now, fortunately for me, there's like a trapeze going on here. And so swinging from one identity to the next means I don't want to grip on both, because then I'll be torn apart. So as I take on the new identity, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, there is still the remnants of what was past. And what I'm starting to realize is nothing in that past was wasted. I worked very diligently to recontextualize even the bad things that happened, because I kind of landed on my purpose, which is on my whiteboard over here, which just says to engage and connect authentically and inspire. It's that simple. And so whatever I do, I constantly have that, but I also have to engage and connect authentically to myself in order to make that happen. So it means dealing with fear. It means dealing with outside circumstances, which sometimes I, like any human being, can get really hung up in and have to go, wait a minute, that is genuinely other, and that does not have anything to do with me. And so returning to this place where I think I've tried to be my entire life, but nothing was wasted in getting there. And now, I mean, as you know, Hope, so very long story short, during the pandemic, for all the bad things that happened, there were a lot of good things that happened too. I would go on walks every day. And in my neighborhood was my old friend, Michael Orland. Years ago, when I performed a nightclub back in New York, which was called Let Me In, but really should have been called Please Love Me, because that's what I was trying to do. Like, can you please love me as a performer so I can succeed, you know? He had been my musical director. And I said to him, boy, wouldn't it be funny if I went back and sang? And he said, I would love it. And I said, well, I'll think about it. 8 months later, I said, okay, I want to come in. If it's not there, I know you'll be honest with me and you'll tell me. And if it is there, then we'll take it from there. And the journey became going to his open mic, reconnecting with a woman named Celeste Simone, who's like Broadway's best voice teacher, who performed with me years ago. And I loved her. And she did a song called Larger Than Life. The lyric to that is, imagine you're an artist and the world's a great big canvas. You can paint whatever suits your mood or style. You needn't follow anybody else's line. Choose your own design. But when you make your mark, make it larger than life. You can choose your colors, make them positively brilliant, like the flowers growing on a jungle vine. Don't be afraid to show the world how bright you are. Show them you're a star. But when you make your mark, make it larger than life. And it goes on. You can actually see it on my YouTube channel. But that kind of was my signature song. Everybody else in the world, including the songwriter, had forgotten that song. I had to remind the songwriter of his own song so he could do a lead sheet for me, which he was kind enough to do, Ira and Tellis. Well, now I have an amazing team behind me, and I usually was the team leader. I was always the one in control for many reasons. But now I am placing myself in the hands of Michael Orland, Celeste Simone, and yesterday, a woman named Lee Martino, an award-winning director and choreographer, came on board. And I'm putting myself in these people's hands for my one-man show, which will be on September 29th in Palm Springs. My partner, Andrew, is a brilliant cinematographer and editor. He is going to shoot the show. I have no idea where I'll go after that, but it almost doesn't matter to me, because in the last performance, which I hope you saw on Facebook, I saw myself objectively really for the first time, and I had achieved my purpose. And I said, okay, now I'm ready. And that was in an open mic. So it's been a really interesting journey. I still feel things really deeply. I still get my feelings hurt, but I think I passed through those zones a little faster. Yeah, and grief. I know this is going to sound weird. It took me a long time to make friends with it.
Mhm, mhm.
And to
That doesn't
welcome
sound
it
weird at all.
when it's present, and to go, okay. And you know what? I read this great book that was recommended to me called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff, life-changing. Yeah, so that's my story. And here I am.
Wow. I first of all, I'm just writing that book down. I want to just say that
was a lot of talking, sorry.
no, but hey, this goes wherever we go. So it's all perfect. What you just kind of summed up in a nutshell is your personal evolution. And that's what we're really here to do. And you've done it very consciously, which is also the desired way. It doesn't mean painless. It just means conscious, because you're actively making choices. You've been making choices along the way. Letting go of an identity is massive, and your timing couldn't be more perfect, astrologically speaking, right? Because we're now literally tomorrow moving into a very new chapter, and it on Monday, today, every day this week is like boom, boom, boom. New, and the kind of new where the old, we take the nuggets from the old story, but we're really creating something brand new. And so that's why this month is, every month I do a theme, I think I told you. And so this month's theme is vision. because we're really looking into a future or that is potentially going to be so different that it has no relevancy to the past. You know, back when you and I were talking years and years ago, well, we were just rolling forward out of our past, and it just more of the same in a way. But that's not where we are now. You know, you've always been cutting edge, in your work with the VR and all of that. But we're really on the precipice of something quite unknown. So I was wondering how are you getting any sense or nudges about what might be around the corner?
To be honest, one of the biggest challenges for me has been to remain in the present. And so when I'm doing session work with people, I say, when I'm doing readings, I say, well, I shouldn't be telling you anything you don't already know on some level, that I don't have more power over your life than you do. But if there's something keeping people from being in the present, I see that. If they are present, then it's like clear skies and I can see ahead. But for the planet, to be honest, Hope, there's just too much input.
I agree.
Between social media and news, and it's alarmist, and the advertising industry, and everything, not everything, but many things have this doom thing about it. Advertising tells you you're not enough unless you buy this. Medical ads tell you you're going to get sick, so here's the medication that'll fix that. The news focuses not on progress. I'm working with a woman in Macau, Zimring, and she has a podcast called Environmental Voices Rising. I also work as a coach. We've been working together for a while, and her whole point was the media never focuses on the solutions to climate change. It's all about women, by the way, women making solutions. That's her podcast. And so her whole purpose is to amplify the voices of these women who are changing the world. And so when I look ahead, first of all, but in my day job, which I still do, I've had to do a tremendous amount of research on Generation Z, and have so much positive feeling about them and the difference that they will make. Not that I feel I need to apologize for what we did to have them make a difference. But, it used to be people didn't change until got desperate enough, angry enough, any of those things. These kids are starting from a place of transformation, I think, because they care. And so when I look that far ahead, I say, well, I think the planet's going to be in pretty good hands. I think a lot of what's going on right now is the fear of losing identity and power. The people that have been in power for a long time, the political system doesn't work. Local government, at least in my town, is great. I mean, I live in a town of 10,000, very progressive, and very much listening to the people. But you're watching, it's kind of like, what do you call it, when people wrench against something, where they, pull back or they tighten to resist what's going on. And I just think, systems that no longer serve. And if you study something called Strauss-Howe generational theory, which is based on seculum every 100 years, 4 generations in every 100 years. They predicted this in their book, The Fourth Turning, in 1997. And I also have a piece called Starving the Wolf at the Door that is on Medium. And that talks about this great shift and change. But here's the difference for me. I think I have lived through enough terror to understand that several things happen. One is humanity has proved to be resilient. Just a side note, on my birthday in meditation, guidance was, tell us what you love about you. And I was like, God, no one ever asked me, literally, God, no one ever asked me that question before. And the first answer was, I love my resilience. And the thing is, humanity is terrifically resilient, and it's terrifically adaptable.
Mhm.
And, you can warn people, people may not change their lifestyle. I was very disappointed to find out that a lot of recycling is a myth and not really happening. But I think that these problems will be solved. It doesn't mean we're not like going through the eye of the needle. And I'm sure everyone on this call has gone through the eye of the needle, the dark night of the soul. I think the planet goes through it, the civilization goes through it, the individuals go through it. But there's tremendous resilience if you stick it out and hope. I think and I'm being totally honest here, there were a couple of times in all that darkness that I just thought, this pain is absolutely unbearable. I have to find a way out. And when I was looking to leave the planet, the universe sort of stepped in, and like I think you were one of the people who called. I got like 10 phone calls in a row, and it was like, okay, I get the message, And I think we will ultimately be fine. It doesn't mean there won't be pain. It doesn't mean there won't be suffering. If you ask me what is missing in the world, what the number one thing that is missing in the world, and I'm challenged on it too, it's compassion. I think we get afraid. Everybody gets afraid, and it's like when you learned life saving in high school. They said, be careful because the other person can draw you down and you both drown. It's like, how do you stand in your own light and trust that light, have compassion for others, and not sacrifice yourself to save someone else? And today, again, I got a call today. A person that I know in my industry is dying of cancer. And the person that called me said, I'm calling to ask you to pray for them that it was implied that they get better. And I said, when I pray for someone, I pray for their highest good.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what their journey is. I pray that their heart and mind is open to divine energy, but I pray for their highest good. I don't see death like I used to see it. Because, and this, I worked as a grief counselor for people with AIDS and their families for 6 years of my life, witnessed a lot of death. But this death/rebirth, whether it's someone's life, whether it's a government institution, we're constantly dying and being reborn. It's a tough process that is just what we were talking about before. An identity dies, grief, government changes, and the amount of friction that happens during that time, I think, is in direct correlation to the amount of fear that's present. And so all I want to do is do what I can to be authentic and genuine and have compassion for myself and others, and notice my own judgments and not judge myself for having judgments, but look at what that opportunity is. So it's hard work some days.
It sure is. It sure is. But I love the fact that you never really have shied away. And even in the dark time, you were wrestling with it. You were working it. It wasn't stuffed down and put away somewhere. You had it. It was happening right front and center, right? So, I mean, that's an amazing quality, and especially in a man. You're not just any man, but you've never been afraid to go there, is I guess what I'm saying. And
you know what, Hope? I don't know that I ever gave myself a choice.
well, there you go.
I think it was in my nature. There was, I was sexually abused as a kid. So the injustice that was done then, there was never anybody that paid for that. There was never any justice. And so for the longest time, if you cut me off in traffic because I had this weird sense of justice that everybody should pay for what they do. And I'm writing a new book. It's called What If? And each chapter is a different question. And one of the chapters is, what if there was forgiveness without justice?
Mm.
And that was a big lesson for me. So I get hurt very easily. Like any child, when you're abused as a kid, someone expresses what you think is love and attention, and it's not. And then when they're done, you're discarded, and then the rest of your life is about, what do I have to do to get people to love me?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if I have to be honest with myself, I think this entire time I've been looking for God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And some days it was very obscured, very, opaque. I couldn't see, I couldn't find. But I had people show up in my life
Mm-hmm.
that loved me unconditionally. And I couldn't even receive that because I felt that all love was conditional.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to learn to accept that. And in the relationship I'm in now, it's like, wow, did I ever really have a relationship before this one? I mean, we've been together 8 years, but it's called on me to examine the best in myself and the worst in myself, and to take responsibility for those things. But I don't, I had to go talk to the little kid inside of me and let him know that I was going to protect him now.
Yeah.
And that I was going to value him and love him.
Yeah.
And all this hard work, it's like I tell people, when you do the work or do the love, it actually does pay off. On my birthday, I thought to myself, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I worked really hard to get here. And the world kind of responds to the way you feel about yourself. So it certainly hasn't been an easy journey. If it ended tomorrow, I'm like super grateful for what I have learned in the evolution of my soul. I don't believe, and I've looked, that I ever deliberately hurt anyone. And that I'm pretty proud of. That's
kind of huge.
Unfortunately, I would hurt myself instead of hurting them, but that's another story. So, yeah, so it's all I want to be now is that, to be authentic, to engage and connect authentically, to share my successes, my failures. I think not needing approval or validation has created this sense of self and this sense of liberation that I really never knew before.
I think we come by that. I think age helps a lot with that.
I think it does. I was on Jennifer's show the other day, and she said, there was somebody on, and she said, I have to ask you this first, and I'm really sorry. How old are you? And the person on the other end said, I'm 52. And she said, okay, I can share this with you because I don't think I could share it with someone who was in their 20s and have them get it. And I thought, my first thought was, well, this is kind of age discrimination, but I get it. I get it. Less drama, more discovery. I have no idea where this singing path is going to lead. I'll never be Josh Groban. I don't want to be Josh Groban, but I am a storyteller who sings, and I'm good at it. And so wherever that leads, I'm kind of letting the road rise up to meet me instead of chasing, striving, fighting, struggling, all of that stuff. Because it's saying you have to trust what's going to come through you. And it's not to say I'm not working on my craft. If I stood up and turned around, you'd see no butt because I've worked it off. So I'm working diligently from a craft side. You know that feeling as well, having to hone that craft so that it's there for you, so that when you get in the present, you just trust it and you go, and even if it's not there, you're still going to connect. But I had this experience, Hope, after I sang on stage the last time, where I really kind of felt fulfilled. I felt I had done my job. And I came down off the stage, people were crying, and people were very gracious and very, thank you, you made my evening. And I just was able to let it in and let it land on my heart. I can just remember going, oh, thank you. I can remember putting my hands on my heart and saying, oh, thank you, and being able to receive it, but not from an ego point of view.
Right, right.
But from I connected. I engaged and connected authentically. It worked. I did what I was supposed to do. So.
Oh, that just gives me such a big smile. I love it so much. I love it so much. And to come full circle. Another thing that Brian and I did not figure out for years was that we were both cast in a show, the same show, and him in New York, me in Chicago. And it was a show about the Kennedys. And I was cast as Admiral
God,
Kennedy.
talk about your major disappointment. Oh, God.
We both had a huge disappointment with this. This was going to go to Broadway. And I was cast in Chicago in the out of town, first kind of exploration of it. And then, so they cast me, I quit my job. I was ready. I was going to get my equity card, all these great things. And I was waiting for my contract, and my contract didn't come. And so I ran into somebody who was also cast, and they said, oh, I got my contract, I signed it. And I went, what? You did? Long story short, it was a small show, and they paired you up with who your partner was going to be. So I need, my Robert Kennedy, we were paired up together. Well, apparently I had to pull teeth to get this information. My Robert Kennedy didn't take the show, did something else. So they had to recast that person. And then I didn't go with that person. So they put somebody else in. I talk about grief. I went into a crying jag for 3 days. And that was when I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to New York. Anyway, years later, because I was just like, I'm done in Chicago. I need to move. Years later, this guy, the show is called One Shining Moment. Tell the story, Brian.
So I auditioned, boy, I remember the audition song, like it was from Promises, Promises. The lyric, and it was so appropriate for my life at the time. The lyric was, did you ever really stop and take a really good look at yourself? I just took a peek, really peeked, to tell the truth. Through my eyes, I don't look too good to myself. Half as big as life, that's me, but that's not the way I always been. Anyway, did the audition, wore my hair right. The casting director said to me at the time, I think, would that I, hold on, just a little audio visual assistance here, since we're talking about it. Hold on. No laughing, please. This is what I looked like at the time.
Oh my God. What a gorgeous man.
And he said, and I had my hair down like, like Bobby Kennedy. And he said, I think you're our Bobby Kennedy. And then heard nothing. The next thing I heard was the show was being canceled because Teddy Kennedy was going to run for president. And whatever the reasons were, they weren't going to do it. It was something about political. I don't know what the hell it was. And it was like, okay. And I can't remember if it was before or after, but a similar thing happened with Do Black Patent Leather Shoes Really Reflect Up, where I was cast and the show didn't happen. So I used to say to my friends, I better not, if you're auditioning for the show and I get cast, it isn't going to happen because I'm cursed. But yes, and the interesting thing was I just said to Celeste, my voice teacher, in the car, calling her to check in, crying, saying, this is all I ever wanted to do in my life was sing. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I have to be honest when I say that when I walked out of the house to go to New York, my father, who was in the entertainment industry on television and radio, and my mother, who was a producer, my father said to me, "You will fail," on the way out the door. Got no support. Now, he didn't want that life for me, but I didn't have a choice, and so that I had to prove him wrong. And that was I just wasn't strong enough to actually do that. And so eventually I kind of lost my mojo. I remember going to dinner with the casting director who had cast me in, oh my God, what movie was that? The Verdict. Who cast me in The Verdict. English, Venetia Rickerby, no longer with us. And she said, "Darling, I have to be honest with you. You could be a good actor, but you'll never be great. Do you know why? Why? Because you don't want it badly enough, and you don't want it for the right reasons. So if I were you, I'd stop and do something else." And I listened.
Wow.
I listened. And then I started writing songs, and I was so confused about, I was a staff writer for her, and I was friends with Frank Langella, who said to me, "You should be a songwriter, forget acting, blah, blah, forget singing, just be a songwriter." And I was so busy listening to other people that I couldn't even first listen to my father, then listen. It's like this little kid that's saying, "Wait a minute, this is what I want to do. You're saying I can't do it, And so, yeah. Going back and talking
Here you are going back full circle and coming at it, but you're coming at it for the right reasons now.
It's gonna be great.
It
feels great. I said to the director, I said, "I want the audience to feel like they're in my living room and we're all in it together and we're just gonna have a great night. That's what I want them to feel." And she was like, she got me. It's interesting when someone gets you and they get you and you don't have to legitimize yourself. Wow. It was just like, oh my God, yes. And Michael, who has made recommendation after recommendation, has never steered me wrong. It's like you asked me to do something. I trust you implicitly. Yeah, sure. Michael says, "I want you to go to this ear, nose, and throat doctor and find out what's going on." Acid reflux, that's what was going on. So that was about changing my whole diet so that I would have a voice. But the diet was an anti-inflammatory diet. And so it was so much more, and it was all about taking care of yourself. I was like, yeah.
Brian, talk a little bit about the first book that you wrote. Not the one with Olivia, the More book. Wasn't it called More?
It was called Whole.
Whole, that's what I meant. Okay.
And actually, I just finished recording the audiobook. It's being edited now. I'm not quite sure when it's coming out. But if you're on Instagram, I'm certainly going to make an announcement there. I'm BS Hurst on Instagram. Feel free to follow. So I had a show with Bina Murray called Determination, and it was focused on millennials. Very long story short, I lived on the Illinois-Iowa border. I went to all the candidates' rallies in 2006, and what they were saying never made it to the news. Didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat. The news was filtering everything that we heard. In 2012, it was happening again. And I said, we need to do a show where blah, 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 where we're getting honest, we're seeing what's happening on social media, we're millennial kids who are old enough to vote, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Management changed hands with the company that had bought the show, and they killed it. And it was the second time that it got killed. Got killed in 2006, got killed in 2008. That's what it was, 2006, 2008. No, it was 2006, 2008, 2012. That's what it was. Okay, so everything was crashing and burning. Another like freaking major disappointment. And I'm sitting and I was commuting from Moline, where I was living with my partner at the time, to LA because I kept the house here, was going back and forth. It was a compromise I never should have made, but I was too scared to lose the relationship, which, you know, ending that relationship, he ended it. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Terribly painful, but the best thing that ever happened. Anyway, I'm sitting in the airport and I go, what do I do now? And I hear, give us 30 days. At the end of 30 days, you will have a book, and the name of the book is Whole. I was like, okay. So for the next 30 days, I just listened and took dictation. And at the end of 30 days, I had a book called Whole. And what it was about was, like, it's so funny. I always have to read them. I still read my own books. Because I have a friend who says to me, you need to go read chapter 6. And you know, you can't stand it when someone throws your own words back at you. But the opening of the book goes, to know whole in the duality of reality, you must know broken. To know broken is to recognize that you are, always have been, and always will be whole. A week before the book came out, my partner came to me after 20 years and said, our relationship is over. I'm not going to therapy. There's nothing you can do to fix it. I didn't know that he was already in another relationship. And I still had a book to get out, and I still had to believe in what I was doing. And it's like, and all the back talks about the relationship and blah, 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 blah. And even in the acknowledgements, and then I recorded a new intro and kept the old one in. But there was another reason. I had, like Hope, here I was, the vice chairman of the Television Academy. And here I was, an intuitive who was earning his living that way, had also been on The Breakfast Show on Fox, had been on Moon Zappa's show on VH1. And I decided to run for chairman of the Academy. Now, no new media person had ever been chairman of the Academy. The first vote, tie. The second vote, tie. The third ballot, tie, acrimony, and they decide that they're going to delay the election for a month. In that month, call it Oppo research, they found all this stuff, sent out an email to the entire board saying something like, do you want a sideshow psychic for your chairman?
Oh my gosh.
So it was like, you know what? Just like when you came out of the closet being gay, you got to come out of the closet about this. You have to be whole.
Wow.
So that was the first book.
Wow. Well, I highly recommend it to everybody. They can just find it on Amazon.
Oh my God, it's on Amazon, it's on Smashwords, but I think the audiobook, you know, I ended up, there's a program in virtual reality called Helium. It's a meditation program. And the person, Sarah Hill, who I've known for a very long time, good, a beautiful heart, kind, loving spirit. I adore her. She asked me if I wanted to write a few meditations for this that already existed. And they already had like the films and stuff. And I said, well, I've never done that before, but let me try. Sure enough, I did it. I loved it. And then she said, would you mind recording them? You have a great voice. So I said, oh, not at all. So I recorded them. Then after I heard the playback, I thought, you know what? Time to do the book as an audiobook. And so I think it's going to be great. I hope you won't fall asleep during it because there are certain relaxing parts. But yeah, so that book was written in 2012. I think it's still relevant. Taking me a long time between books. I don't know when What If will be done, but to be able to write a book in 30 days. Oh, and I had my friend, Terry Bergman, who is also an amazing intuitive. I said, I need to be held accountable. I'm supposed to be writing a chapter every day. So I'm going to send you the chapter that I write. Sometimes I got it in at 11:59, but I got it in. So.
And what was your process? Would you go into sort of an altered state, or how did you?
Sometimes it still works that way. Like this whole thing about grief and identity. I'm on a Stairmaster yesterday and I'm just taking dictation. I'm just listening to it. And I'm so yesterday was like, is about grief and growth. Letting go of an old identity based on old patterns, including proving your relevancy, and that you're enough. True power lies in making a difference. People want to be remembered. They want to know they make and have made a difference. And yet this is something you're able to feel only in the present. You work to build an identity based on an idea of identity, but people who actually work to make a difference are more fulfilled. It's a life of service to your highest good and therefore the highest good of others. This experience, this grief, is letting go of who you were in favor of who you are. There's also grief in letting go of beliefs. What if you think who you think you are is not who you truly are? What if who you think you need to be is not who you truly are? There's desperation in clinging to an old identity and an old role and belief system. So I'm just like hearing this, and sometimes it was it depended where I was. I could be on a walk and had to stop and sit down and pull out my phone. I could usually feel it. It reminds me of when Jane Roberts would talk about the Seth books, which were really the first books I read when I discovered all this, because I was psychic as a little kid, stuffed it, and it all came back in the late 20s. But you could sort of build, sometimes they get the chapter heading, and that's the whole thing about what if. I was just writing in my journal, and it was like, there's a book coming, it's called What If, blah, 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 blah. So I just sort of step aside. I have an amazing therapist who doesn't think I'm completely crazy for when that happens.
Lucky you.
Yes. And I decided I needed to change after my father passed away. I decided, I need to change this conversation in my head about him and about myself. And so I worked to change that conversation.
That's good. That's probably why you're able to walk away from that old identity, because he was very wrapped up in that, I think.
You know what? He was a remarkable human being. The fact that he
the people here don't know who he was.
So my dad created the format that became American Bandstand. He was really well known in Philadelphia. He started in radio, went to television, had like 50 years in the broadcast industry, really beloved by Philadelphians. But he didn't have a great example of parents. He did the best he could. He wanted the best for his kids. He wanted kids more than anything that he could love. I see all this now, but he had to be selfish as a child in order to survive. And he was never able to not be selfish. His survival depended on it. And so he really did, both my parents really did the best they could. They did damage, but they didn't do damage deliberately. And beginning to recognize that, wow, this was a man who really cared about us, but didn't know how, tremendously liberating. This is a man that didn't support me in what I wanted to do because he wanted me to be safe. He wanted me to choose some profession where I wouldn't have to deal with rejection all the time. He wanted me to be safe. I get all that now, but it was a lot of work to get to that point, to find compassion for him and what his life was, and my compassion for my mother and all the loss she experienced as a child. And even as an adult, my mother lost her father when she was 9, then her 2 brothers and her mother when we were kids. How hard for them to have to go through that stuff. And by the way, the generation didn't talk about any of this. They just sucked it up and moved on.
Yeah.
Father never thought he was a success, never thought he was enough, was till the day he died was afraid. That's so sad.
Well, look how you've carried the ball forward, I mean, it's really just beautiful. And the thing is that he was a huge personality. I mean, he dominated the scene, one could say.
There's I had to clear out the house, of course, and found so many things that you can't ask about after a person's dead. It's like, what the heck, So here's Dad with Nat King Cole and Eddie Fisher.
Move it over to the center a little bit. Yeah. Nat King Cole and Eddie Fisher. Wow.
And Eddie Fisher. And then there's Sinatra, and these were like, and I grew up with these people in my house and didn't even know who the hell they were and really didn't care. I just wanted to go do something else. And then my mother I'm kind of looking through this, but my mother managed talent, and yeah, so I mean, they had this amazing, this is Dad with the Supremes,
Oh, my goodness.
and
Wow.
the Beatles when I was 8, and he was larger than life, but terribly insecure.
Yeah. As so
And
many times.
he was as big as he was because of my mother,
Oh,
because she
wow.
was behind him, and she eventually became his producer. So,
Well, listen, I want to give people a chance to ask questions. And, Brian, I mean, we've touched on some of the main themes. There is the wonderful also, if you have any children in your life, I highly recommend A Pig's Tale, which Brian wrote with Olivia Newton-John, his dear, dear friend. And he gifted it to us when our kids were little, and it was always one of
did
their
she
favorite.
autograph it? Did I have to autograph
You
it?
did. I don't know if she did. It's packed up in storage right now.
Yeah, it was so much to keep mailing books to her. Say, please sign this. So, yeah, that's that loss. I still am wrestling with that.
I mean, what a courageous woman, and geez. Well, anyway, so
Fun,
I highly recommend that
fun.
book. And so does anybody have any questions of Brian? And we haven't talked, Ginny. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, everything leaves.
Well, first of all, Brian, oh my God, you are the most lovable human being I have
Thank
ever
you.
been happy to listen to. I mean, you just glow,
Thank you.
and the love just pours from you. All of us, we're sitting here with smiles a mile long.
Thank you.
Just thank you so much for sharing yourself tonight.
You're
I
welcome.
would love to know a little bit more about how you awakened to this spiritual side of you and the intuitive side of you, and how you were able to incorporate it and what that journey was like for you, if you want to share.
It's a fun story. So at the time I was living in New York, it was like 1982 or 83, something like that. And everybody was running to this psychic named Linda Waldron. And she had moved to New York from Hawaii, and she was living in this funky apartment in Greenwich Village. And I went for a reading because everybody, all my friends that were on Broadway, everybody was going. And I thought, oh, well, I'll go. And so I went, and she opened the door, and she's in this muumuu with this big orchid behind her ear. And she said, welcome, I'm the butterfly fairy. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And I sit down for a reading with her. And the first thing she says is, oh, I came to New York to read the purple people, and there are 100 of you. And you're one of them. And all the purple people wear something purple when they come. Well, I was wearing purple socks, and I hadn't worn those socks in a very long time. And and that morning I said, oh, I'll just put these on. So then she had my attention. Then she gives me this reading, and I had already done a past life regression with this woman, Sally Fisher, who sent me to another woman, Rhea Powers, who did a much deeper regression. Actually, I've written a whole book about this. I should just go back and publish it. It's called The Year of the Light. Anyway, Linda calls me, and she says, oh, you're a healer. You're a healer. I'm going to send you business cards. I'm going to send you clients. I'm like, what? I said, you don't get it. I'm going to be a Broadway star. I'm not that. And she said, well, I don't want to disappoint you, but that's not what I'm seeing. I'm like, my mind, I'm going, And business cards show up in my mailbox in my apartment building, and I start getting calls. I call her. I said, what the hell am I supposed to do? She said, you don't have to touch anybody. Just put your hands over and just let God, come through you. I'm like, fine. So people come, like she sends me some with a knee problem. And they rave. Then she starts telling me with people with progressively worse things like cancer. I called her on the phone. I said, I cannot do this. I'm not this person. This is not who I am. I don't want to do this. And she says, okay, well, I'm supposed to go to this event and do readings, but I'm not feeling well. It's tonight at 8:00. Can you go and do the readings? I said, I don't know how to do that. She said, it's easy. Just close your eyes and say what you see. I'm like, so I go, I'm sitting in this little corner with this little fold over sign that says psychic readings. I'm sitting there from 8:00 to 10:30 with my hands folded and no one comes and sits down. It's an event with many people. No one comes and sits down. Then all of a sudden, this woman comes and she sits down. Thickest New York accent I ever heard. She goes, my name is Judy, read me. I close my eyes, I read her, I open my eyes, and she's like, the next thing she does is, Garros, come here. And the next thing I know, there's a line of people. And so I'm closing my eyes, I'm saying what I'm saying what I'm saying. I call Linda Waldron, I tell her what happened. She goes, okay, now I'm going to send you my overflow. I said, wait a minute. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to charge? She said, charge people $25 for an hour. Just close your eyes, say what you see. Okay. You give someone this ability, you look at this ability to a person who all they want to be is loved. And they think, meaning I thought at the time, aha, this is going to be the thing that makes people love me.
Oh.
And so that was my whole motivation for doing it. And about 3 months into it, I basically had like some kind of breakdown. I couldn't get out of bed. I wasn't really sick. I went to my friend Sally Fisher and she said, you don't get to use this way. It is not for you to be a star. You are here for service. If you don't learn that, don't do it. And that was the start of it. And then the rest was, I read this book, which was like, don't read this book unless you want to get really deep. The Keys of Enoch. Read that book, did the Course in Miracles, read a ton trying to get the quest, but basically was doing a lot of channeling at the time, was doing seminars where I would just close my eyes and give myself over to an entity named Jonathan. And that was still about ego and stuff. So I got burned because it was all about ego for me. And then I finally realized, wait a minute, you're meant to be of service. This is not being given to you so that you can be on television or, and then I got to be on television. I had big problems with that. Like I did some show with Gary, I can't remember his name. God, he was married to Marianne Mobley. The PM show, something like that. Anyway, and I had to really resist that. And then I'd watch other people that were doing television shows as mediums and stuff like that. And I would go, this is all the wrong thing, and a certain someone that I read in the beginning who went on to create a bigger television show and all this stuff. And it was like, you can either be jealous of that person or you can know that is not your path. I don't know if that answers the question, but it all started with the butterfly fairy.
I love that story.
There she is in a moo-moo, and she's like etheric. Follow me.
And the fact that she was in the village, I mean, plucked right out of Hawaii. That's such a
Morton
mix-up
Street.
right there.
I will
Really,
never forget it.
Wow.
And I had been psychic as a kid, but I'd shut it down. I dreamt the deaths of my uncles exactly as they happened. And you're 10, 11 years old. You think you caused it, you don't get it. And so it's like,
Yeah. Okay, somebody else had a question. Fiona.
not so much a question, just saying how beautiful it's been. I think, you know, your authenticity just completely comes through. You inspire.
Thank you.
I just was kind of with you every bit of the way. It's almost like you express that part about us that is the one, you know, because I just feel myself in everything that you were saying about yourself, including the hurt child and everything, you know. And I had a thought too. I don't know, we're probably a similar age, I don't know, but
I'm 67 and proud of every year.
oh, well then I'm 10 years more than that. So anyway.
You look great.
But you know, that dropping of identities and so on has been very real for me a lot, and nothing, you know, lit by the stars like you. It's very kind of homey, down to earth, you know, around the thing, and being a kind of activist, a community activist, and dropping, you know, all of that. But I got this image as you were talking, like how it feels to be older and about, you know, future generations. That we're like earthworms, you know, that are doing the composting of all the poisons and getting the poisons out and getting the soil as good as we possibly can for the seedlings coming up, you know. That's kind of like all we can do at the moment. I don't see a future. I don't know what it's going to be, but we can we're just like preparing it, and we have to feel that that's not, you know, beneath us or too lowly or too, you know.
Well, what's great about Gen Z is they don't diss the generations that came before them. They want to work. They want to collaborate. It's interesting. I'm working with in a startup. I'm working with 2 millennials and a Gen Z, and the
Brian, identify Gen Z age
Gen Z
range.
is age 25 down to age 10, I think.
Wow.
So if you look up Strauss-Howe, STRAUSS, Howe, HOWE, generational theory, you'll see the different generations and what they each represent. And usually there's a defining event for a generation. For ours, it was the Kennedy assassination in America.
Yes, definitely. Well, just thank you. It's just been
You're very welcome.
Beautiful. I've just felt very much in your lounge with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's beautiful, Fiona. Anybody else want to chat with Brian? Sherry?
I'll just say thank you, and it was fun. I enjoyed it too. You're certainly authentically come through, and that was nice. And what was interesting is when I heard your name, I thought, I know that name. And then I looked back and I have the whole. I had gotten that book like in 2015, January. So a few years after you put it out. But yeah, I'm going to have to go back and read it again because that was a long time ago when I got it. So,
I thought you were going to tell me there's another Brian Hurst who I think is retired. He lived like 20 minutes away and he was a medium.
Oh,
No.
you're kidding.
No, and people kept calling. I was like, wow, you really want me to get over my ego, don't you? He was a medium. People kept calling and saying, are you the Brian Hurst that talks to the dead? And I'm like, there's another Brian Hurst, and that's how I found him. And he would get calls from me. I would get calls from him. We, you know, got to be friends. I don't know what happened to him, but he was much older than I am. So
no,
That's
it was
funny.
cute. I recognized the book and the name. So cool.
thank you.
So thank you.
Well, you know what, Sherry? I interviewed Brian many years ago when the book came out.
Yes.
Well,
you
maybe
did.
that was it. I don't remember how I got turned on to it, but I got it then, and I enjoyed it. So yeah.
Well, it actually may be. I mean, the audiobook is going to come out, but it's funny because you make so many relationships, and I was always afraid to ask anybody for anything. I was willing to give everybody anything, and a friend of mine works at Audible and basically has like opened the door for how it works. And then another friend of mine who I know from performing from 40 years ago, we've reconnected, and she is a literary agent, and there's an opportunity for maybe the book to be re-released. So we'll see if it's in Yiddish, we say beschert, meant to be. If it's beschert, it's beschert. And so, and if it's not, it's not. But thank you for buying the book.
Yeah, you're welcome. I see it's available still on Kindle right now, I think.
Yep, it's still, and it's available print on demand, and yeah, it's still available. And still, every time, I do Jennifer McLean's prediction week every year, and we talk about the book, and then like a bunch sells more, and I get feedback, and some people put their reviews up on Amazon. It's great. All you want to know is that you make a difference, and the reviews of the book kind of let me know that it's connected.
Nice. Anybody else want to say howdy to Brian? No, you're all sufficient. Yes,
well,
Lisa.
I just want to say it, as someone who has had grief over career losses or sort of undesired changes, and still struggle with that, even though, my God, it's like a 20-year-old thing at this point. Yes, the grief of losing that ability to call yourself, that thing, that professor or whatever is, it's really tough, and it's not recognized. It's more than just losing a job.
Yeah, especially if you worked really hard and you did a really good job.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I think, honestly, Lisa, one of the hardest things for me to accept in the process
Mhm.
was that no one remembers.
Yeah.
So you work to make a difference. I say this for no other reason than to illustrate it.
Mhm.
The reason broadband distributed content is eligible for Emmy Awards, like Netflix, is because of something I did, put before the Academy, and they voted for.
Mhm.
Nobody remembers, nobody cares. The moment you're gone, and some people will even try to diminish what you did to lift themselves up.
Yeah.
And that's even harder. When I turned over the gavel to the chairmanship of the Producers Guild and Media Council, the new chairman banged the gavel and he said, "Now the work ahead of us is to undo what the last administration did." Right in front of me.
That's disgusting.
And I knew that I had done a great job. And, it was just like, wow, you really, and so when people were saying poor Obama, I was like, well, I don't know how it feels on that scale, but I do know how it feels when someone wants to undo everything you have done. And the way I look at it, I mean, it's behind me. It is behind me. That was a great time in my life. I did the absolute best that I could. It's over. It's gone. There are other opportunities for me now to move on. And I cannot go back and fix anything or change anything, because the moment I turn around, I can't see what's here. And I'm sorry for the grief and the pain, but boy, grief can be really profitable. If you let it be and you let it run through you and you acknowledge what you did, because you know what you did.
Mhm.
You know how many lives you touched. You know that stuff. No one can ever take that away from you. That is yours to keep. And that says, oh, well, if I did that in one area, I certainly can do it in another. There's, it's my nature to teach. It's my nature to give. Let me see what the next chapter is.
Working on it.
Good for
What
you.
she's doing.
As Hope knows, I'm always figuring out what I'm going to be when I grow up.
Well, what if you didn't have to figure it out? What if you just had to feel it out?
You know what? You've just activated my root chakra, man. Now
That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's beautiful to say that, because that thing of what there is to do. I sometimes feel like a wilting lily in the mud, and it's just been feeling muddy, like all those old identities all composting. But I just kind of hope that lily can grow again, and you're talking about you're doing a one-man show, and you don't know where it'll go from here, but it's kind of like that suddenly is a sort of resurrection, you know, like of everything, you know, all in one thing. And I think, oh, well, what's my one person show? You know,
If
it's
it
sort of
wasn't
like,
for all of the experiences I had, I wouldn't be here with you now. And so none of them are discounted. And even the ones where I will use the word summarily dismissed because either my timing was wrong or they didn't get, who knows what the reason was, but it's unimportant now. I can't go back and figure that out. What I can do is say, what is my opportunity here now in the present? You know, I get very, when it's gloomy, I get gloomy. And I don't know if you've been watching the news, but it's a nothing but rain in California. And today I was just standing at my back door and I was staring out and I was looking at how green everything is. And I was thinking about how all the groundwater reservoirs are being replenished. And I was thinking how fortunate it is that who's ever doing rain dances, that their prayers are being answered. And it's like, how can I look at this as something that's really advantageous, even though I need the sun and I need the light? And right now it's like, you know, I look out the window, I can't show you the view, but I look out the window and I'm like, still raining. And I mean, it's been raining hard, you know, so much so that the ground is having a hard time observing it. But I look at that and I could be depressed and I could be gloomy, or I can just be present and look at what's really happening. And that's what I was trying to do today, which is, hey, this is it. It is what it is. How am I going to respond? What are my feelings about it? That's what I acknowledge first, which is, oh God, this is gloomy and I feel gloomy. Now let me look.
Yeah. Well, that acknowledgement is the first step. Listen, everybody get Brian's book. Are you still taking clients, doing
Oh my
sessions?
gosh, yes. So I have tried to stop doing readings for years. And I keep coming back to them. So you can email me at Brian Seth Hurst, all one word, at hotmail.com. If you want a reading, and I will reply with the details. If you put hope in the title, you'll get the same discount that 10% that Healing with the Masters members get. And Masterworks.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And then, you know, there's a coaching program. You can look at that. But what I would really appreciate is youtube.com/@ Brian Seth Hurst. That is my YouTube channel. And you can actually see the progress that I'm making. So if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, it's funny, I haven't put the last video up, but the difference between when I first got on stage a year ago and now is like night and frickin' day. You know, it was like, hadn't performed in 40 years, got in front of people. My mouth was so dry. And now I feel at home. And that latest video, I think is up on Instagram. I don't know how long it lasts when you put something up on Instagram, but it's there on Instagram as well. Yeah, and it's at BS Hurst is Instagram. And you know, I learned something really valuable a few years ago, which was don't preach, share. And so any of the opportunity that I have, like you've given me today, Hope, I'm grateful for, to share in hoping that engages and connects authentically and inspires.
I think you succeeded with gold stars, mister.
you certainly have. You're a big teacher for me.
Thank you. Thank you. I think what's interesting to me is when someone like Hope, who's walked the journey with you. I mean, when did your mom pass away? How many years ago was that?
Oh, 20 something years, 2000.
30 years that we know each other. But you, as someone who knows me, you've sort of watched the journey.
Yeah.
you know, and you know, the darkness, the confusion, the anger. I can remember railing. I was so angry because I think loss is difficult. Death is difficult, but betrayal is much more difficult.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with deep, deep, deep betrayal. And you were there. And and you let me have my anger. You let me have my resentment, my anger, all of that. That was very, very dark, you know. The truth of the matter was I had betrayed myself.
Mhm.
And I had to come home to myself. And if that relationship had not ended, God knows where I'd be.
I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Well, you're blooming beautifully, my
Thank you.
dear. And thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us and just sharing your authentic self. That's going to be the title of this broadcast.
Thank you. I've had a great time. It's lovely to meet you all, and thank you for the return of the love. I appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody for coming, and I'll put out the replay so lots of other people will be able to watch it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Mwah.
much.
Night,
Good
night,
night,
everybody.
good morning, good day, wherever you are.
Good morning.